The Gallant Few Rangers podcast is brought to you by Triple H Mortgages, the one-stop shop for all your mortgage and mortgage insurance needs. Contact them today on 01453 887 179 or hello@hhhmortgages.com. You can also find them online at hhhmortgages.com or on their Facebook page.
Since we qualified for one of the comparatively new international cup tournaments, we have been privileged to receive in our grounds some distinguished clubs from other countries. None of them, however, have been more welcome visitors to Molineux than the famous Rangers, whom we see here tonight. Rangers are amongst the elite in Scottish football, and all of us at Molineux are eagerly looking forward to seeing them. This is a direct quote from Wolves' matchday programme in the 19th of April 1961, where Rangers visited for the second leg of the European Cup Winners' Cup semi-final and eventually progressed to the final. Today we are going to look in more detail of the run that took Rangers to their first ever European Cup final. Today I'm delighted to welcome Colin onto the History Show. How are you doing today, Colin?
I was okay before then, but I've got goosebumps after reading that. That's
This is only take 4 of us.
Take 4.
Struggling the word comparatively, so yeah.
That last take you nailed it, but there I thought we were gearing up for a final there.
This is the second episode that we have on the History Show. We'll look back at some important times in Rangers history and review to maybe some of our younger listeners and the older listeners a wee refresh on what it means to be a Rangers fan.
And apologies for anybody who was getting attached to the first intro song. You'll probably notice that we try and do a different intro song for every series. We had David Bowie Heroes, but YouTube have banned that song in Iran, so we've changed it up just in case there's any Iranian listeners.
And any offence caused by David Bowie in the Iran region, we do truly apologise for that. So
publicly apologise.
The statement will be out shortly.
So, Scott, before we get into the actual 1961 Cup Winners' Cup tournament, I think it's important to look at the background of Rangers in Europe. So, at this point in time, European football, European competition is so new. So, the first ever European Cup was only launched in 1955. And Rangers they weren't in it that season, but the following season they played their first ever game in the European competition. 24th of October 1956, they were drawn to Nice in the first round of, as I said, the second ever European Cup. Rangers would win 2-1 at Ibrox in the first leg, but lost to the same score on the away leg. 65,000 people at Ibrox for the first ever European game. The tie went to a playoff and Rangers lost 3-1 in the so-called neutral venue of Parc des Princes in Paris. Not too sure that's too neutral. Also, UEFA headquarters were in Paris at that point in time, so I think Nice got the better the better draw. That was Rangers' first occasion in Europe. Their second attempt at the European Cup came the following season. Rangers retaining the league title, and they went back to France for the first round again, but were drawn against St Etienne. Many listeners will know about the St Etienne bike. Sits quite bizarrely in the Ibrox trophy room. We won't get too into that because I think that's a whole episode in itself.
Absolutely.
But Rangers beat St Etienne 3-1 in the first leg at Ibrox, and despite losing 2-1 in the away leg, we go through in aggregate. In the second round, we're drawn to Italian champions AC Milan. Rangers lose 4-1 at Ibrox and 2-1 at San Siro to a very, very good Milan side who eventually become runners-up of the European Cup that year.
We'll move on to the following experience in Europe. So, missed out in Europe in the 58-59 season, coming second in the previous year, but we return again to the European Cup for the season of 59-60. Rangers actually did have a very decent campaign in Europe, and they probably, again, it could be another show down the line. We got beaten the semi-finals on that occasion. On the lead to our eventual exit, we beat Anderlecht, CH Bratislava, Sparta Rotterdam, and our way to the semis, and it was a very talented Frankfurt team that beat Rangers 6-1 and then 6-3 to reach the final instead of ourselves. The final was actually held at Hampden, where there was 127,000 people inside Hampden who saw Real Madrid beat the Germans. Colin, imagine it's we look back to our most recent European where it was in Manchester and we brought so many people. Imagine what it had been like if it was at Hampden and Rangers were in the final. It would have been chaos.
127,000 for a European final. That's the biggest ever attendance to this day for a European final. I mean, it would have been a lot closer to 200,000 surely. In the days where, one in three people would buy a ticket, everybody else were lifted over the turnstiles. Oh, it would have been madness, absolute madness.
Yeah, so I actually do remember hearing about that game at Hampden. I'm sure there was a big piece on it when Real Madrid and Bayern Leverkusen were in the Champions League final, and they were talking about the game and the quality of the football there. So there's really no shame in getting put out in the semi-finals from Frankfurt. I know they might not seem like much nowadays. They were a very, very good side in their day.
And it's, the reason we put these in, it's important to kind of have a bit of a prologue, if you like, to the season we're going to talk about. Rangers they had 3 seasons of experience, mixed success, and
you need to appreciate as well is a lot of these players that were in the Rangers team would never have experienced playing against players maybe for Scotland, because obviously we know that 100% of the players would have been Scottish in that team. You couldn't buy foreign players, but they wouldn't have known the likes of coming up against a German team, a French team, such different qualities. You look nowadays, it's very unusual for a British player to be, they always stand out, British players. You look at nowadays Foden and Sancho, it's very unique for somebody to be like that. But obviously in the European context, your Spanish, your Germans and things like that, you look at how technically gifted they are, so it's a complete new experience for them coming up against Scottish teams.
Exactly. And even we look at even Michael Beale, for example, has a modern day coach has the luxury to go into South America, to travelling around Europe. That wasn't the case back then. It was very much you learn football from your own region, sometimes your own city, and depending on the size of the country. So it's an absolute it would have been a bizarre experience.
The only way you can really compare it maybe is my personal view is you look at World Cups around that time, how successful they were. So you go back to that area, obviously South America was very prominent. I think Brazil won it in 58. But even still, you look at West Germany might have been dominating that time, and obviously Scotland were nowhere near winning a World Cup trophy, you know what I mean, or probably even England at that time. So the amount of talent that these European sides have is, the gulf in class must have been very high, is my personal opinion. But I think in terms of what we've discussed there, getting all the way to the semi-finals and that, you don't hear about that a lot, Colin, you know what I mean, that we did get to a semi-finals of a European Cup back then. I think if you I don't know how many people you need to ask, but I think it's quite uncommon knowledge.
No, it is, and it was one of the things that we both wanted to bring up before going into this, the campaign that we're going to talk about. Just it was obviously it's still in its infancy, the tournament. It's only maybe I think that was the 5th ever European Cup, but it's still a massive achievement. Moving into the following season then, from reaching the European Cup semi-finals, Rangers enter into the first ever European Cup Winners' Cup. They haven't come third in the league the season before, but they did win the Scottish Cup. So just a bit of background on the team and the tournament itself. So Scott Simon's team remained roughly the same for that kind of 5-6 year period. There is a notable new signing though, a certain James Curran Baxter, better known as Jim Baxter. He actually he'd broken the Scottish transfer record signing fee at that time. I think it was like something like 17 grand. I mean that's not even half a Glen Kamara these days. It's the only kind of notable transfer. In terms of the European Cup Winners' Cup itself, only 10 teams entered the tournament for the first ever tournament. A bit of a myth around this, why there's so few countries. It was always thought that because so few countries didn't have a national cup tournament, that's why only 10 entered, but that wasn't the case. Actually, the likes of Hungary, East Germany, Italy, they all sent the league runners up. Czechoslovakia sent their kind of unofficial league cup winners. That was a bit of a friendly tournament. So every country did have the they were allowed to enter someone other than the league winners.
The league got to choose who's going to be put forward for this tournament.
Yeah, but it's more likely at this point in time, a lot of countries seen European competition as a burden. Even if you look at the first couple of years of the European Cup, Aberdeen should have represented Scotland in the first European Cup, but they declined it. They seen it as a burden. They seen it as a distraction for league football. So Hibs actually entered the same way Manchester United and Chelsea. They actually both went against the FA's wishes and entered it because the FA didn't want English teams participating in this, because it was almost taking the shine away for the league and the FA Cup. So I think that's actually more why only 10 teams entered. But that's, if you look at the kind of importance in European competition nowadays, it's bizarre, isn't it?
It's what everybody aims for nowadays, and it's crazy to think that. Probably finances had a lot to do with it as well, in terms of, like going away to all these places. But thinking like people would decline Europe nowadays, it's crazy. Like how many teams in Scotland would give their right arm to like go to the group stages like we are just now, even. When was the last time teams like who are so successful in Europe, like Aberdeen, in that sort of stage? And you look down like south of the border, the aim for every team is top four. Like, it's winning the league is obviously the holy grail, but people celebrate getting into the Champions League and the Europa League as the like your target for the season and the be all and end all. Like, it probably doesn't matter if you finish fourth or second. Like, the fact that you're in that Champions League spot is the main thing that matters.
But even if you look at Rangers, we are recording on the back of Rangers being drawn away to Slavia Prague in the last 16. Being in the last 16 of European competition, it's a continental pride into this. Like, it keeps your country and your team on the map. And I don't know if it's, obviously it's easy with hindsight, we are talking 60, 70 years on, but it's just bizarre to think why would you not want your country represented in this stage?
Yeah, no, it's crazy, and it's such an opportunity for players and teams. I think, like, especially you'll play nowadays, you'll go in pre-season tournaments and people will come over to Scotland, for example, and you'll play like all these type of players, like even like at youth level. Like I'm going back to when me and you were at youth level, Colin. We were in places like Amsterdam and all over Barcelona and things like that, playing foreign teams. So like it's a normality nowadays, but like back then it couldn't have been. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, unless you were representing your country, which 11 people out of a 5 million people population, like you're going to be doing well to get in that setup. So Rangers were drawn as one of the 4 teams to take part in the preliminary rounds. I mean, if 2020 has taught us anything, it's not always a foregone conclusion for Scottish teams to qualify for that. And so Rangers were actually drawn to play Hungarian runners-up Ferencváros over the 2 legs. So, as I say, a bit of history with them coming to Scotland.
Maybe this is why they put out Celtic in the 2021 season. Maybe this was finally payback. They remembered it all for the 1960 season.
These Scottish bastards. So, despite the visitors taking the lead within 20 minutes of the first leg at Ibrox, Rangers actually did go on to win the match 4-2. Harold Davis, Ralph Brand both grabbing a goal at each, and Jimmy Miller scoring the other 2. In the return leg, Rangers actually do go 2-0 down in Hungary, but in the 61st minute, Davy Wilson pulls on back to avoid a replay at Rangers and go through 5-4 winners in aggregate. So as you can see, it could have been a potential banana skin, but
yeah, it's and again going back to what we're talking about, how many times would these players have been up against somebody from Eastern Europe? You know what I mean?
I firmly believe it's just completely different qualities that somebody from, you look at Hungary nowadays and you think that, people should be beating them. Obviously you don't have the TV footage, but we should be beating these teams comfortably. But, they'll have such different qualities, you know what I mean? They might be naturally more faster, naturally more stronger. It must have been so difficult to research this thing. It must just be simply play to your strengths and read the paper and see what they've done in previous years or whatever, because obviously the turnover in staff is a lot different to what it is nowadays. It's a completely different side 1-2 years down the line, but predominantly you keep the same team for a sustained period of time.
Yeah. And absolutely, and we had a wee laugh and a joke about Ferenc Barros at this point, but to run Rangers close, and this is a very, very good Rangers team. Like Scott Simmons' team, it probably doesn't get enough credit but it is full of superstars. Like we spoke about Jimmy Baxter earlier on, Davy Wilson who got that goal. Mr. Wilson is an absolute legend for Rangers, and some people would put him in the top 10 greatest ever Rangers. In the next round, Rangers travel to Germany for the first leg of the quarterfinals, and they play Borussia Mönchengladbach. I always loved that name. It's Borussia Mönchengladbach. It's so fun to say. A very fine performance by all reports for what we've seen, and Rangers go 2-0 up in the first 25 minutes in Germany, or West Germany I should say at this point. Jordan Niven, the Rangers goalie, actually saved a penalty which could have gave the hosts some hope in the match had it gone in, but Ian McMillan puts Rangers 3-0 up in the second half, and the tie looks all but finished. So we are saying the tie looks all but finished. Turns out no one told Rangers, and at Ibrox they absolutely run amok with Gladbach. 8-0 they win, Scott, in the second leg. 8-0 in the European competition against a top German side. Wow.
Trying on the pitch the night before or something. It's brilliant. It's, I mean, even when we talked about it in the last show that we done, like the tactics and things like that, but even still, 8-0 is just mental, isn't it?
And it's the second highest ever scoring for Rangers. I can't remember that I've seen it, but they've actually beat a team 10-0, and I think it may have been in the Champions League qualifiers or something in the 90s, but at this point in time it was at something 11-0 in aggregate. So in the second leg, Jimmy Baxter opens the scoring with his first ever European goal. Ralph Brand gets his first ever hat-trick. Jimmy Miller and Harold Davis get a goal each, and there's a own goal in the 30th minute, completes the tally. What I found funny with this, all the reports we've seen, it said that 38,000 fans turned out to see this game, because most thought the tie was done. I bet you there was a few regrets there.
Oh, I know. But Rangers fans, you can't win with them, because if it's if it was one each, I'd be like, oh fuck's sake, we should have done more in the first leg. But then, you win 3-0 away from home, and they're probably no point going.
It's good to see, even in the 60s, we've got a fickle bunch.
Same values, definitely. So we qualify for the semi-finals, which is to be played at the end of March 1961, and it sees the first ever Battle of Britain as Rangers are drawn to Wolverhampton Wanderers. Now, back then, Wolves were a very strong side in England at the time. They were involved in a European Cup a couple of years before, and regularly competing at the top end of the old First Division and the FA Cup. They were actually the holders going into that season. First leg was actually played at Ibrox in front of 80,000 fans. Alex Scott and Ralph Brand are the scorers as Rangers win 2-0. The goals came in the 33rd and the 84th minute.
Well, saying 80,000 turn up after the last that game, eh?
They were probably expecting another 8-0. So.
Knew they turn up.
It's actually quite surprising. The first leg at Ibrox, Rangers sold out, obviously, as I mentioned, 80,000 tickets, but Wolves actually brought only less than 1,000 people to that game, which is crazy. I think, obviously we can't get to grounds just now, but the first chance of a trip down to Ibrox, similar to Manchester, people are going to be there in thousands, and I would like to hope that a team like Wolves would do the same nowadays. That would be just such a great atmosphere. But they actually brought 1,000 people there, so it's crazy, isn't it? Like, when you think about that, do you think they thought they were underestimating it, or what do you think?
I don't know if it is maybe the time that fans might not have appreciated how big a deal this is to be playing against the best teams in the continent. Maybe they didn't appreciate that, or maybe like it's the 60s, like it's post Second World War Britain, and obviously ration stuff isn't still in playing, but it's still a country trying to go on the up and trying to recover. Maybe it is finances. I don't know.
Yeah, no, definitely. So obviously we won 2-0. You're going to come on to the second leg, Colin, but the return leg, Scotland actually played England in their annual home international 4 days before the return leg, and Scotland lost 9-3 to England at Wembley. And obviously, to go with current times, it was up to Rangers to restore some pride to Scottish football, isn't it? And keep the coefficient up.
we said last time, Scott, some things never change, eh? And this is definitely one of them. 9-3, that's an embarrassment as well. And I think the guys like Ralph Brand and Davy Wilson, they were in that Scotland team as well. And I think there's, it's changed days for now, but at that point in time, it was like being a Rangers fan was hand in hand with being a Scotland fan. Being a Rangers player, hand in hand going with being a Scotland player, and like these players personally took a battering, so I think they were really fired up for the return leg. Or maybe that's why England done so well. There was a couple of Wales players in that England team. Maybe they were just they were wanting revenge for going 2-0 down at Ibrox.
The Wales players must have thought, this is a walk in the park, perhaps, taking it complacency. So
for the return leg, Rangers actually do have a few injuries. Without Jimmy Miller, Ian McMillan and Max Murray, all of whom were regulars in the previous 2 rounds. 10 minutes in, Harold Davies actually overstretches for a tackle and pulls a muscle in his leg as well, so that's another injury worry. After maybe 10-15 minutes of getting treatment, he does go back on, but instead of playing in the centre, he goes out wide to try and keep out of the way. These are the days where we don't have any substitutions, so we either play with 10 men or we play with 10 men and an injured player. It's madness, isn't it?
I know. I actually remember that, and I think it was like the Liverpool and AC Milan Champions League fight. I think it was the one that AC Milan won, and it was Rocky Junior. They'd used all their subs, and this man was he was a Brazilian centre half, and he was playing like right attack or right wing, and he was just limping about the field. So like it must have been like similar to that. You give all you can. It's like a final. It's a high pressure situation, but you just need to do what you can for the team.
So all the snippets that we've seen for this game, it does talk about a very, very good, entertaining game of football with two teams at the top of the level at the time, and top of, amongst the best teams for their countries. Rangers were the best team in Scotland that year. They went on and won the league, and Wales were challenging a very good Spurs side. But the game finishes 1 each, and it is very much heralded as such a great game of football. Alex Scott puts Rangers 1-0 up at the Stoke at half time. Ralph Brand latches on to a long ball, sees off a couple of Wales defenders, lays it back for Scott, who puts a kind of finesse shot past the keeper. Peter Broadbent equalises for Wales in the 65th minute, but Rangers are able to hold on to their 3-1 aggregate win, making them the first ever British team to reach a European final. So we've talked about the level of football Scott there, which is also we couldn't find a video, you and I, watching back to this. YouTube wasn't quite about in
the 60s.
Wasn't about, no. Nobody was there with a periscope streaming it on Twitter, no IPTV, anything like that. But all the newspaper reports and stuff, it was talk about just two great teams, and obviously the likes of Davy Wilson, Jimmy Baxter, just been great for Rangers, which leads me on my next point. Some listeners might have heard quite a famous Rangers song. and it all stems back for this game. This is your favourite Rangers song?
That's right, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
the fact that we have a song to sing about a single game where we didn't even win, I think that says everything you need to know.
Oh, I know, and it's how many Rangers fans would know about that game or have seen it, you know what I mean, and we still sing about that song. It just, I feel as though that it proves like how well we played, and really how much we took back the English press, and you know, like maybe, you know, people underestimating Rangers at that time. Like, if they're just a Scottish team, they're not going to beat well, like we had bet them, but I don't think they expected to have a level of opponent. And the fact that we're still singing about that, as you say, what was that, 60, 70 years later, it's we sing about that. It's a catchy song, but it has a lot of meaning behind it as well, because I think this is the first time we're like appreciated that we're such a big club, sort of in a European scale.
And I think Wolves were expecting a decent game. That quote we read out at the start, but I don't think they quite thought would be a match for an English team at that point, by the looks of it. What strikes me about that song is speaking about the fans. You know, we need to caveat this with you and I are both biased, but I'm sure we both agree with the best fans in the world, and we always have been. This is a Rangers podcast. If anybody's looking for an objective point of view, then maybe look elsewhere. But no, they speak about the fans and just turning up in the thousands, and you know, singing "God Save the Queen," and like you and I were both talking beforehand. It looked as if, speaking about that, you were a Rangers fan and a Scotland fan, like passionately. The fans that travelled down to Wembley for that game against England, most of them made a wee holiday out of it. Like, I'm sure there was a lot of kind of angry wives, but 4 days later, on the way back up, they stopped in Wolverhampton and caught the game as well. So a lot of fans that were actually at Wembley seen this game as well, and that's why there was so many of them. And the last thing, just on the line that I love, is the world forever after we'll talk of Jimmy Baxter, and on his head they'll place a noble crown. And I think that's, again,
It's beautiful, isn't it?
it's beautiful, and it's just, we'll say this so many times through these shows, but that's a whole show in itself, the kind of the rise and fall of the late great Jimmy Baxter.
Yeah, definitely. We'll move on to the final. Now we drew Fiorentina for the final.
I don't think we drew them. I think both teams I think both teams won their way in there.
Well. And this was actually the only ever two-legged affair in the tournament. So the first leg was played on the 17th of May 1961, in a Wednesday night with a 7:30 p.m. kick-off. Luigi Milan scores in the 12th and 88th minute for the visitors, and it's said that while Rangers were outmatched in terms of quality and tactically, there was some brilliant individual performances by the home side. Most notably, as we've discussed many times in this episode, Jim Baxter, again, superb.
21-year-old at that point.
21, exactly.
What were you doing when you were 21? You weren't playing in a European final anyway.
So the return leg was 10 days later, and it was played at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. This old enemy, Colin, Luigi Milan, puts Fiorentina away ahead early on. We then had Alex Scott pull one back in the 60th minute, but not enough for Rangers, and Fiorentina get the second from Kurt Hamren in the dying moments of the game. So yeah, we eventually went out, but there must be some great pride with that. As a team who maybe don't play, you know, not used to European style of football, and obviously we won the European Cup Winners' Cup, you know, 10 years later. It must have proven good experience building up to that as well, and a successful campaign and all. And everybody looks back at 2008 in Manchester and think it was a successful tournament that we done. So you need to look back at this in the same you know, mentality, don't you?
I think you do, and you look at Rangers' season that year. We went on and won the league. We went on and won the League Cup, and then getting to the league, the European Cup Winners' Cup final as well. And it's, again, I think this Scott Simon team doesn't get enough credit. We've got guys like Jim Baxter, Davy Wilson, Harold Davies, Ralph Brand, absolute guys that go down in folklore with Rangers fans, and this was them competing in the big stage, not just this season but the season before as well, getting to the semi-finals. But you do need to take some pride in that. It's the first ever British side to reach a European final, absolutely. But it's
not talked about a lot, is it? It's not like the first European. Like, if somebody said that in a pub quiz, it's like even down south or up here, I don't think many people would know that if it was who's the first British team to compete in a European Cup final.
No, exactly, and it's because we didn't win the trophy that kind of puts a shadow on like talking about this side. But we got to another one 5-6 years later. We won't spoil it too much, but we'll come to that at some point. We won it 11 years later. This was the first of 4 European finals that Rangers would reach, and you're right, it's not spoke about enough.
Brings us nicely to a close. It was good to look back in that. As I say, it was a privilege actually researching that in a bit more detail. I hear the song every week when you go to Ibrox. Finding actually a bit more information on what happened was a real pleasure for me anyway, Colin.
No, me too. Again, going back to that, it's one of my favourite songs, but just actually understanding the meaning behind it, and it wasn't just this random one-off game. Like, it was a game of huge importance for Wales and Rangers, first ever Battle of Britain, and it's the semi-final of the first ever European Cup Winners' Cup, and it's a really important part of Rangers' history.
Always good scalping English when they're into it. So.
Always good. Always good.
That'll bring us to a close. Thanks, thank you, Colin, for your time and your research.
Always a pleasure, Scott.
No problem. And we'll be back next month with another episode of the History Show. Thank you for listening.
I'd been in exile for some years and my eyes filled up with tears when the Rangers came to Wolverhampton town. So I took a trip along just to hear some famous songs when the Rangers came to Wolverhampton town. I stood there all alone while the boys all down from home sang of Rangers, that team of great renown. And a sight I'd never seen when they sang God Save the Queen when the Rangers came to Wolverhampton town. There's not a team like the Glasgow Rangers, one of the famous songs they sung, and a sight I'd never seen when they sang God Save the Queen when the Rangers came to Wolverhampton town. Now on the field below, the boys put on a show, the likes they'd never seen at Molyneux. And it's football, it was grand, from Macmillan, Scott and Brand, when the Rangers came to Wolverhampton town. There's not a team like the Glasgow Rangers, one of the famous songs they sung, and a sight I'd never seen when they sang God Save the Queen when the Rangers came to Wolverhampton town. Now the white flag must come nearer with men like Bobby Shearer, the way he played at Wolverhampton town. And the world forever after would sing of Jimmy Baxter, for on his head they placed that noble crown. There's not a team like the Glasgow Rangers, one of the famous songs they sung, and a sight I'd never seen when they sang God Save the Queen when the Rangers came to Wolverhampton town. Now I knew it had to happen, I heard a mighty roar, the famous Glasgow Rangers they had scored. And the sky was white and blue, Wolverhampton shook right through, the loyal rampant Rangers had come through. There's not a team like the Glasgow Rangers, one of the famous songs they sung, and a sight I'd never seen when they sang God Save the Queen when the Rangers came to Wolverhampton town. When the Rangers came to Wolverhampton town.